So the spirit Danes in days gone by, and the kings who had ruled them had courage and greatness. We have heard of those princes' heroic campaigns. There were shield chiefs, scourge of many tribes, a record of me benches, rampaging among foes. This terror of hot troops had come far, a foundling to start with. He will flourish later on as his powers waxed and his worth was proved. In the end, each clan on the outlying coast beyond the railroad had to yield to him and began to pay tribute. That was one good king. Afterwards, a boy child was born to shield, a cub in the yard, a comfort sent by God to that nation. He knew what they had toiled, the long times and troubles they come through without a leader. So the Lord of life, the glorious Almighty, made this man renowned. Shield had fathered a famous son. Beowulf's name was known through the north. A young prince must be prudent like that, given freely while his father lived, so that afterwards in age when fighting starts, steadfast companions will stand by him and hold the line. Behavior that's admired is the path to power amongst people everywhere. Shield was still thriving when his time came and he crossed over into the Lord's keeping. His warrior band did what he bade them when he laid down the law among the Danes. They shouldered him out to the sea's flood. The chief they revered, who had long ruled them, a ring war proud made the harbor. Ice-clad outbent, a craft for a prince. They stretched their beloved lord in his boat, laid by his mad amidships. The great ring giver, far-fetched treasures were piled upon him, precious gear. I never heard before a ship so well furbished with battle tackle, bladed weapons, and coats of mail. The mass treasure was loaded on top of him. It will travel far on unto the ocean's sway. They decked his body no less bountiful with offerings than those first ones who cast him away when he was a child and launched him alone out over the waves. And they set a gold standard up high above his head and let him drift to wind and tide, bewailing him. And mourning their loss, no man could tell, no wise man in hall or whether veteran knows for certain who salvaged that load. Then it fell to Beowulf to keep the forts. He was regarded and ruled the Danes for a long time after his father took leave of his life on earth. And then his heir, the great half-Dane, held sway for as long as he lived, the elder, the warlord. He was 4 times a father, this fighter prince. One by one they entered the war. Hrothgar, Hrothgar, the good Helga, and a daughter I've heard, who is once Onella's queen. Abominably big to the battle-scarred Swede. The fortunes of war favored Hrothgar. Friends and kinsmen flocked to his ranks, young followers, a force that grew to be a mighty army. So his mind turned to hall building. He handed down orders for men to work on a great mead hall, meant to be a wonder of the world forever. It will be his throne room, and there he will dispense his God-given goods to young and old, but not the common land or people's life. Far and wide through the world, I have heard orders for work to adorn the wallstead were sent to many people, and soon it stood there, finished and ready in full view. The Hall of Halls. Herald was the name he had set on, whose utterance was law.
Nor did he renege, but doled out rings and torques at the table. The hall towered, its gables wide and high, and awaiting a barbarous burning. That doom abided, but in time it would come, the killer instinct unleashed among in-laws, the bloodlust rampant. Then a powerful demon, a prowler through the dark, nursed a hard grievance. It harrowed him to hear the din of the loud banquet every day in the hall, the harp being struck and the clear song of a skilled poet telling with mastery of man's beginnings. How the Almighty had made the earth a gleaming plain girdled with waters. In his splendor he set the sun and the moon to be earth's lamplight, lanterns for men, and filled the broad lap of the world with branches and leaves, and quickened life in every other thing that moved. So times were pleasant for the people there, until finally one, a fiend out of hell, began to work his evil in the world. Grendel was the name of this grim demon, haunting the marches, marauding round the heath and the desolate fens. He had dwelt for a time in misery among the banished monsters, Cain's clan, whom the Creator had outlawed and condemned as outcasts. For the killing of Abel, the Eternal Lord had exacted a price. Cain got no good from committing that murder, because the Almighty had made him anathema, and out of the curse of his exile there sprang ogres and elves and evil phantoms, and the giants too, who strove with God time and again until he gave them their reward. So after nightfall, Grendel set out for the lofty house to see how the Ringdanes were settling into it after their drink. And there he came upon them, a company of the best, asleep from their feasting, insensible to pain and human sorrow. Suddenly then the god-cursed brute was creating havoc. Greedy and grim, he grabbed 30 men from their resting places and rushed to his lair, flushed up and inflamed from the raid, blundering back with the butchered corpses. Then as dawn brightened and the day broke, Grendel's powers of destruction were plain. Their wassail was over. They wept to heaven and mourned under mourning. Their mighty prince, the storied leader, sat stricken and helpless, humiliated by the loss of his guard, bewildered and stunned, staring aghast at the demon's trail in deep distress. He was numb with grief, but got no respite, for one night later, merciless Grendel struck again with more gruesome murders. Malignant by nature, he never showed remorse. It was easy then to meet with a man shifting himself to a safer distance to bed in the bothies, for who could be blind to the evidence of his eyes, the obviousness of the hall watcher's hate? Whoever escaped kept a weather eye open and moved away. So Grendel ruled in defiance of right, one against all, until the greatest house in the world stood empty, a deserted wallstead. For 12 winters, seasons of woe, the Lord of the Shieldings suffered under his load of sorrow. And so, before long, the news was known over the whole world. Sad lays were sung about the beset king, the vicious raids and ravages of Grendel, his long and unrelenting feud, nothing but war. How he would never parley or make peace with any Dane, nor stop his death-dealing, nor pay the death price. No counselor could ever expect fair reparation from those rabid hands. All were endangered, young and old, were hunted down by that dark death shadow who lurked and swooped in the long nights on the misty moors. Nobody knows where these reavers from hell roam on their errands.
So Grendel waged his lonely war, inflicting constant cruelties on the people. Atrocious hurt. He took over Heorot, until the glittering hall after dark, but the throne itself, the treasury seat, he was kept from approaching. He was the Lord's outcast. These were hard times, heartbreaking for the Prince of the Shieldings. Powerful counselors from the highest in the land would lend advice, plotting how best the bold defenders might resist and beat off sudden attacks. Sometimes at pagan shrines they vowed offerings to idols, swore oaths that the killer of souls might come to their aid and save the people. That was their way, their heathenish hope. Deep in their hearts they remembered hell, the almighty judge of good deeds and bad, the Lord God, head of the heavens and high king of the world was known to them. Oh, cursed he is he who in time of trouble has to thrust his soul in the fire's embrace, forfeiting help. He has nowhere to turn, but blessed he who after death can approach the Lord and find friendship in the Father's embrace. So that troubled time continued, woe that never stopped, steady affliction for half-tamed son, too hard an ordeal. There was panic after dark, people endured raids in the night, riven in by terror. When he heard about Grendel, Hygelac Stain was on home ground over in Geatland. There was no one else like him alive. In his day, he was the mightiest man on earth, high-born and powerful. He ordered a boat that would ply the waves. He announced his plan to swell the Swan's road and search out the king, the famous prince who needed defenders. Nobody tried to keep him from going. No elder denied him. Dear he was to them. Instead, they inspected omens and spurred his ambition to go. Whilst he moved about like the leader he was, enlisting men, the best he could find. With 14 others, the warrior boarded the ship as captain, a canny pilot along the coastal currents. Time went by, the boat on water and close under the cliffs. Men climbed eagerly on the gangplank. Sand turned in surf. Warriors loaded a cargo of weapons, shining war gear in the vessel's hold. then heaved out, away with a wheel and the wood wreathed ship, over the waves with the wind behind her and foam at her neck. She flew like a bird until her curved prow had covered the distance on the following day at the due hour. The seafarers sighted land, sunlit cliffs, sheer crags, and looming headlands, and all they saw. It was the end of their voyage, and the Geats vaulted over the side out on the sand and moored the ship. There was a clash of mail and a thresh of gear. They thanked God for the easy crossing of a calm sea.
When the watchman on the wall, the shielding's lookout, whose job it was to guard the sea cliff, saw shields glittering on the gangplank and battle equipment being unloaded, he had to find out who and what the arrivals were. So he rode to the shore, this horseman of Hrothgar's, and challenged them in formal terms, flourishing his spear. What kind of men are you who arrive rigged out for combat in coats of mail, sailing here over the sea lanes in your steep-hulled boat? I have been stationed as lookout on this coast for a long time. My job is to watch the waves for raiders, any danger to the Danish shore. Never before has such a force under arms disembarked so openly, not bothering to ask if the sentries allowed them safe passage or the clan had consented. Nor have I seen a mightier man-at-arms on this earth than the one standing here. Unless I am mistaken, he is truly noble. This is no mere hanger-on in a hero's armor. So now, before you fare inland as interlopers, I have to be informed about who you are and where you hail from. Outsiders from across the water, I say it again, the sooner you tell me where you come from and why, the better. The leader of the troop unlocked his word hoard. The distinguished one delivered this answer. We belong by birth to the Geat people and owe allegiance to Lord Higelac. In his day, my father was a famous man, a noble warrior lord named Ecgtheow. He outlasted many a long winter and went on his way. All over the world, men wise in council continue to remember him. We come in good faith to find your lord and nation's shield, the son of Halfdane. Give us the right advice and direction. We have arrived here on a great errand to the lord of the Danes, and I believe, therefore, there should be nothing hidden or withheld between us. So tell us if what we have heard is true about this threat, whatever it is, this danger abroad in the dark nights, this corpse-maker mongering death in the Shielding's country. I come to proffer my wholehearted help and counsel. I can show the wise Hrothgar a way to defeat his enemy and find respite, if any respite is to reach him, ever.
To defeat his enemy and find respite, if any respite is to reach him ever. I can calm the turmoil and terror in his mind. Otherwise, he must endure in woes and live with the grief for as long as his hill stands at the horizon on its high ground. Undaunted, sitting astride his horse, the Coast Guard answered. Anyone with gumption and a sharp mind will take this measure of two things, what's said and what's done. I believe what you have told me, that you are a troop loyal to our king. So come ahead, with your arms and your gear. I will guide you. What's more, I order our more comrades on their word of honor to watch the boat down there on the strand to keep her safe in her fresh tar, until the time comes for her curved prow to preen on the waves and bear this hero back to great land. May one of the valiant and virtuesome come unharmed through the clash of battle.
So they went on their way. The ship rode the water, broad beamed, bound by its hawser and anchored fast. Four shapes flashed above their cheek guards, the brightly forged work of goldsmiths watching over those stern-faced men. They marched and stepped, hurrying on till the timbered hall rose before them. Radiant with gold, nobody on earth knew of another building like it. Majesty's lodged there, its light shone over many lands. So their gallant escort guided them to that dazzling stronghold and indicated the shortest way to it. Then the noble warrior wheeled on his horse and spoke these words. It is time for me to go. May the Almighty Father keep you and in his kindness watch over your exploits. I am away to the sea, back on alert against enemy raiders. It was the paved track, the path that kept them in marching order. Their mail shirts glinted hard and hand-linked. The high-gloss iron of their armor rang. So they duly arrived in their grim war-breath and gear at the hall, and weary from the sea, stacked white shields of the toughest hardwood against the wall. then collapsed on the benches. Battle dressed and weapons clashed. They collected their spears, and the zephyrs stuck, a stand of greyish tapering ash, and the troops themselves were as good as their weapons. Then the proud warrior questioned the men concerning their origins. Where do you come from, carrying these decorated shields and shirts of mail, these cheek-hinged helmets and javelins? I am Hrothgar's herald and officer. I have never seen so impressive or large an assembly of strangers. Stoutness of heart, bravery not banishment, must have brought you to Hrothgar. The man whose name was known for courage, the Geat leader, resolute in his helmet, answered in return, "We are retainers from Higelac band. Beowulf is my name. If your lord and master, the most renowned son of Halfdane, will hear me out and graciously allow me to greet him in person, I am ready and willing to report my errand." Wulfgar replied, a wilder chief, renowned as a warrior, well known for his wisdom and the temper of his mind. "I will take this message, in accordance with your wish, to our noble king, our leader, friend of the Danes, the giver of the rings. I will go and ask him about your coming here, then hurry back with whatever reply it pleases him to give." With that he turned to where Hrothgar sat, and an old man among retainers, the valiant follower, stood foursquare in front of the king. He knew the courtesies. Wulfgar addressed his dear lord. "People from Geatland have put ashore. They have sailed far over the wide sea. They call the chief in charge of their band by the name of Beowulf. They beg, my lord, an audience with you, exchange of words and formal greeting. Most gracious Hrothgar, do not refuse them, but grant them a reply. From their arms and appointment they appear well-born and worthy of respect, especially the one who has led them this far. He is formidable indeed."
Hrothgar, protector of the shieldings, replied, "I used to know him when he was a young boy. His father before him was called Ecgtheow. Hredel the Great gave Ecgtheow his daughter in marriage. This man is their son, here to follow up an old friendship. A crew of seamen who sailed for me once with a gift cargo across to Geatland returned with marvelous tales about him. A Thane, they declared, with the strength of 30 in the grip of each hand. Now holy God has, in his goodness, guided him here to the West Danes to defend us from Grendel. This is my hope, and for his heroism I will recompense him with a rich treasure. Go immediately, bid him and the Geats he has in attendance to assemble and enter. Say moreover, when you speak to them, they are welcome to Denmark." At the door of the hall Wulfgar duly delivered the message. "My lord, the conquering king of the Danes, bids me to announce that he knows your ancestry, also that he welcomes you here to Heorot, and salutes your arrival from across the sea. You are free now to move forward to meet Hrothgar in helmets and armor, but shields must stay here and spears be stacked until the outcome of the audience is clear." The hero arose, surrounded closely by his powerful thanes. A party remained under orders to keep watch on the arms. The rest proceeded, led by their prince, under Heorot's roof, and standing by the hearth, in webbed links that the smith had woven, the fine forged mesh of the gleaming mail shirt, resolute in his helmet, Beowulf spoke. "Greetings to Hrothgar. I am Higelac kinsman, one of his hall troop. When I was younger I had great triumphs. The news of Grendel, hard to ignore, reached me at home. Sailors brought stories of the plight you suffer in this legendary hall, how it lies deserted, empty and useless once the evening light hides itself under heaven's dome. So every elder and experienced councilman among my people supported my resolve to come here to you, King Hrothgar, because all knew my awesome strength. They had seen me boltered in the blood of enemies when I battled the bound five beasts, and raided a troll nest in the night sea, slaughtered the sea brutes. I have suffered extremes and avenged the Geats. The enemies brought it upon themselves. I devastated them. Now I mean to be a match for Grendel, settle the outcome in single combat, and so my request, O King of Bright Danes, dear Prince of the Shieldings, friend of the people, and the ring of defense, my one request is that you won't refuse me, who have come this far, the privilege of purifying Heorot. With my men to help me, nobody else. I have heard, moreover, that the monster scorns in his reckless way to use weapons. Therefore, to heighten Huilac's fame and gladden his heart, I hereby renounce sword and the shelter of the broad shield, the heavy war-board. Hand to hand is how it will be, life and death, fight with the fiend. Whichever one that falls must deem it just judgment by God. If Grendel wins, it will be a gruesome day. He will gut himself on the Geats in the war hall, swoop without fear on the flower of manhood, as on others before. Then my face won't be there to be covered in death. He will carry me away as he goes to ground, gorged and bloodied. He will run gloating with my raw corpse, and feed on it alone in a cruel frenzy, fouling his moor nest. No need then to lament for long or lay out my body. If the battle takes me, send back this breast-webbing that Wayland fashioned and Heraldel gave me to Lord Huilec. Fate goes ever as fate must.
Hrothgar, the helmet of Shieldings, spoke. Beowulf, my friend, you have travelled here to favour us with help and to fight for us. There was a feud one time, begun by your father. With his own hands he had killed Hitholaf, who was a wolfing. So war was looming, and his people, in fear of it, forced him to leave. He came away then over rolling waves to the South Danes here, the sons of honour. I was then in the first flush of kingship, establishing my sway over all the rich strongholds of this heroic land. Herogar, my older brother and the better man, also a son of half-Danes, had died. Finally, I healed the feud by paying. I shipped a treasure trove to the Wolfings, and Ecthio acknowledged me with oaths of allegiance. It bothers me to have to burden anyone with all the grief Grendel has caused and the havoc he has wreaked upon us in Heorot, our humiliations. My household guard are on the wane. Fate sweeps them away into Grendel's clutches. But God can easily halt these raids and harrowing attacks. Time and again, when the goblets passed and seasoned fighters got flushed with beer, they would pledge themselves to protect Heorot and wait for Grendel with whetted swords. But when dawn broke and the day crept in, over each empty, blood-spattered bench, the floor of the mead hall where they had feasted would be slick with laughter. And so they died, faithful retainers, and my following dwindled. Now take your place at the table. Relish the triumph of heroes to your heart's content. Then a bench was cleared in that banquet hall so that Geats could have room to be together, and the party sat, proud in their bearing, strong and stalwart. An attendant stood by with a decorated pitcher, pouring bright helpings of mead, and the minstrel sang, filling Heorot with his head-clearing voice, gladdening that great rally of Geats and Danes. From where he crouched at the king's feet, Unferth, a son of Ecglaf, spoke contrary words. Beowulf's coming, his sea-braving, made him sick with envy. He could not brook or abide the fact that anyone else alive under heaven might enjoy greater regard than he did. Are you the Beowulf who took on Breca in a swimming match on the open sea, risking the water just to prove that you could win? It was sheer vanity made you venture out on the main deep, and no matter who tried, friend or foe, to deflect the pair of you, neither would back down. The sea test obsessed you. You waded in, embracing water, taking its measure, mastering currents, riding on the swell. The ocean swayed, winter went wild in the waves, but you vied for 7 nights, and then he outswam you, came ashore the stronger contender. He was cast up safe and sound one morning among the heatheremes, then made his way to where he belonged in Brondine country, home again, sure of his ground in strong room and bond. So Breca made good his boast upon you and was proved right. No matter, therefore, how you may have fared in every bout and battle until now, this time you'll be worsted. No one has ever outlasted an entire night against Grendel.
Lines 529 through 606. Beowulf, Ecgtheow's son, replied, Well, friend Unfeth, you've had your say about Breca and me, but it was mostly the beer that was doing the talking. The truth is this. When the going was heavy and those high waves, I was the strongest swimmer of all. We'd been children together, and we grew up daring ourselves to outdo each other, boasting and urging each other to risk our lives on the sea. And so it turned out. Each of us swam holding a sword, a naked, hard-proof blade for protection against the whale beast. But Brecca could never move out farther or faster from me than I could manage to move from him. Shoulder to shoulder, we struggled on for 5 nights until the long flow and the pitch of the waves, the perishing cold, night falling, and winds up from the north drove us apart. The deep boiled up, and its wallowing sent the sea brutes wild. My armor helped me hold out, my hard-ringed chainmail, hand-forged and linked, a fine, close-fitting filigree of gold, kept me safe when the ocean creature pulled me to the bottom. Pinioned fast and swathed in its grip, I was granted one final chance. My sword plunged, and the ordeal was over. Through my own hands, the fury of the battle had finished off the sea beast. Time and again, foul things attacked me, lurking and stalking, but I lashed out, gave as good as I got with my sword. My flesh was not for feasting on. There would be no monsters gnawing and gloating over the banquet at the bottom of the sea. Instead, in the morning, mangled and sleeping in the sleep of the sword, they slopped and floated like ocean's leavings. From now on, sailors would be safe. The deep sea raids were over for good. Light came from the east, bright guarantee of God, and the waves were quiet. I could see headlands and buffeted cliffs. Often, for undaunted courage, fate spares the man it has not already marked. However, it occurred, my sword had killed 9 sea monsters. Such night dangers and hard ordeals I have never heard of, nor a man more desolate in the surging waves. But worn out as I was, I survived, came through with my life. The ocean lifted and landed me ashore. I landed safe on the coast of Finland. Now I cannot recall any fight that you entered, Unfeth, that bears comparison. I don't boast when I say that neither you nor Brecca were ever much celebrated for your swordsmanship, or facing danger on the field of battle. You killed your own kith and kin, so for all your cleverness and quick tongue, you will suffer damnation in the depths of hell. The fact is, Unfeth, if you were truly as keen or courageous as you claim to be, Grendel would have never gotten away with such unchecked atrocity, attacks on your king, havoc in Harrow and horrors everywhere. But he knows he never be in dread of your blade making mizzle of his blood, or the vengeance arriving ever from his quarter, from the victory shieldings. The shoulderers of the spear. He knows that he can trample down you Danes to his heart's content, humiliate and murder without fear of reprisal. But he will find me different. I will show him how the Geats shape and kill in the heat of battle. Then whoever wants to may go bravely to mead, when the morning light, scarfed in sun dazzle, shines forth from the south and brings another daybreak to the world.
Then the gray-haired treasure giver was glad, far famed in battle, the prince of bright Danes, and keeper of his people, counted on Beowulf, on the warrior's steadfastness and his word. So the laughter started, the din got louder, and the crowd was happy. Wealhtheow came in, Hearthguard's queen. Observing the courtesies adorned in her gold, she graciously saluted the men in the hall, then handed the cup first to Hearthguard, their homeland guardian, urging him to drink deep and enjoy it, because he was dear to them, and he drank it down like the warlord he was, with festive cheer. So the humming woman went on her round, queenly and dignified, decked out in rings, offering the goblet to all ranks, treating the household and the assembled troops until it was Beowulf's turn to take it from her hand. With measured words she welcomed the gate and thanked God for granting her wish that a deliverer she could believe in would arrive to ease their affliction. He accepted the cup, a daunting man, dangerous in action and eager for it always. He addressed Wealhtheow. Beowulf, the son of Ecgtheow, said, I had a fixed purpose when I put to sea. As I set in the boat with my band of men, I meant to perform to the utmost what your people wanted to, or perish in the attempt. In the fiend's clutches, and I shall fulfill that purpose, prove myself with a proud deed, or meet my death here in the mead hall. This formal boost by Beowulf the Geat pleased the lady well, and she went to sit by Hearthguard, regal, and arrayed with gold. Then it was like old times in the echoing hall, proud talk and people happy, loud and excited, until soon enough, Halfdane's hair had to be away to his night's rest. He realized that the demon was going to descend on the hall. He had
plodded all day, from dawn light until darkness gathered again over the ground, and stealthily night shape came stealing forth under the cloud murk. The company stood as the two leaders took leave of each other. Hrothgar wished Beowulf health and good luck, named him Hall Garden, and announced as follows: Never since my hand could hold a shield have I entrusted or given control of the Danes' hall to anyone but you. Ward and guard it, for it is the greatest of houses. Be on your mettle now. Keep in mind your fame. Beware of the enemy. There's nothing you wish for that won't be yours if you win through alive. Hrothgar departed then with his houseguard. The Lord of Shielding, their shelter in war, left the mead hall to lie in with Wealhtheow, his queen and bedmate. The King of Glory had posted a lookout who was a match for Grendel, a guard against monsters, special protection to the Danish prince, and the Geat placed complete trust in his assignment of limb and the Lord's favor. He began to remove his iron breast mail, took off his helmet, and handed his attendant the patterned sword, a smith's masterpiece, ordering him to keep the equipment guarded. And before he bedded down, Beowulf, the Prince of Goodness, proudly asserted, When it comes to fighting, I count myself as dangerous any day as Grendel, so it won't be cutting edge. I'll wield to mow him down, easily as I might. He has no idea of the arts of war, of shield or sword play, although he does possess a wild strength, no weapons. Therefore for either this night, unarmed he shall face me. It face me he dares, and may the divine Lord in his wisdom grant the glory of victory to whichever side he sees fit.
Then down the brave man lay with his bolster under his head, and his whole company of sea rovers at rest beside him. None of them expected he would ever see his homeland again, or get back to his native place and the people who reared him. They knew too well the way it was before, how often the Danes had fallen prey to death in the mead hall. But the Lord was weaving a victory on his war loom for the weathered Geats. Through the strength of one, they all prevailed. They would crush their enemy and come through in triumph and gladness. The truth is clear. Almighty God rules over mankind, and always has. Then out of the night came the shadow stalkers, stealthy and swift. The hall guards were slack, asleep at their post, all except one. It was widely understood that as long as God disallowed it, the fiend could not bear them to his shadow born. One man, however, was in fighting mood, awake and on edge, spoiling for action. In off the moors, down through the mist bands, God-cursed Grendel came greedily loping. The bane of the race of men roamed forth, hunting for a prey in the high hall. Under the cloud murk, he moved toward it until it shone above him, a sheer keep of fortified gold. Nor was that the first time he had scouted the grounds of Hrothgar's dwelling, although never in his life before or since did he find harder fortune or hall defenders. Spurned and joyless, he journeyed on ahead and arrived at the bawn. The iron-braced door turned on its hinge when his hands touched it. Then his rage boiled over. He ripped open the mouth of the building, maddening for blood, pacing the length of the patterned floor with his loathsome tread, while a baleful light, flame more than light, flared from his eyes. He saw many men in the mansion, sleeping a rank company of kinsmen and warriors quartered together. And his glee was demonic, picturing the mayhap. Before morning he would rip life from limb and devour them, feed on their flesh, but his fate that night was due to change. His days of ravening had come to an end. Mighty and canny, Hygelac's kinsman was keenly watching for the first move the monster would make, nor did the creature keep them waiting, but struck suddenly and started in. He grabbed and mauled a man on his bench, bit onto his bone lappings, bolted down his blood and gorged on him in lumps, leaving the body utterly lifeless, eaten up hand and foot. Venturing closer, his talon was raised to attack Beowulf, where he lay on the bed. He was bearing in with open claw when the alert hero's comeback and armlock forestalled him utterly. The captain of evil discovered himself in a hand grip harder than anything he had ever encountered in any man on the face of the earth. Every bone in his body quailed and recoiled, but he could not escape. He was desperate to flee to his den and hide with the devil's litter, for in all his days he had never been clamped or cornered like this. Then Hygelac's trusty retainer recalled his bedtime speech, sprang to his feet, and got a firm hold. Fingers were bursting, the monster backtracking, the man overpowering. The dread of the land was desperate to escape, to take a roundabout road and flee to his lair in the fens. The latching power in his fingers weakened. It was the worst trip the terrormonger had taken a hair off. And now the timbers trembled and sang a hall session that heralded every Dane inside the stockade. Stumbling in fury, the two contenders crashed through the building. The hall clattered and hammered, but somehow survived the onslaught and kept standing. It was handsomely structured, a sturdy frame braced with the best of the blacksmith's work inside and out. The story goes that as the pair struggled, meat benches were smashed and sprung off the floor, gold fittings and all. Before then, no shielding elder would believe there was any power or person upon earth capable of wrecking their horn-ridged hall unless the burning embrace of a fire engulfed it in flame. Then an extraordinary wail arose. The bewildering fear came over the Danes. Everyone felt it who heard the cry as it echoed off the wall. A god-cursed scream and strain of catastrophe, the howl of the loser, the lament of the hell-serf keening his wound. He was overwhelmed, manacled tight by the man who of all men was foremost and strongest in the days of this life.
I will be reading lines 790 through 851. But the Earl Troop's leader was not inclined to allow his caller to depart alive. He did not consider that life of much account to anyone anywhere. Time and again, Beowulf's warriors worked to defend their lord's life, laying about them as best they could with their ancestral blades. Stalwart in action, they kept striking out on every side, seeking to cut straight to the soul. When they joined the struggle, there was something they could not have known at the time, that no blade on earth, no blacksmith's art could ever damage their demon opponent. He had conjured the harm from the cutting edge of every weapon, but his going away out of this world and the days of his life would be agony to him, and his alien spirit would travel far into fiend's keeping. Then he had harrowed the hearts of men with pain and affliction in former times, and had given offense also to God, found that his bodily powers failed him. Hygelic's kingsmen kept him helplessly locked in hand grip. As long as either lived, he was faithful to the other. The monster's whole body was in pain. A tremendous wound appeared on his shoulder. Sinews split and the bones lappings burst. Beowulf was granted the glory of winning. Grendel was driven under the fen banks, fatally hurt, to his desolate lair. His days were numbered. The end of his life was coming over him. He knew it for certain, and one bloody clash had fulfilled the dearest wishes of the Danes. The man who had lately landed among them, proud and sure, had purged the hall. Keep it from the harm. He was happy with his night work and the courage he had shown. The great captain had boldly fulfilled his boast to the Danes. He had healed and relieved a huge distress, unremitting humiliations, the hard fate they'd been forced to undergo. No small affliction. Clear proof of this could be seen in the hand the hero displayed high up near the roof. The whole of Grendel's shoulder and arm, his awesome grasp. Then morning came, and many a warrior gathered, as I've heard, around the gift hall. Clan chiefs flocking from far and near, down wide-ranging roads, wondering greatly at the monster's footprints. His fatal departure was regretted by no one who witnessed his trail. The ignominious marks of his flight, where he skulked away, exhausted in spirit and beaten in battle, blooding the path, hauling his doom to the demon's mere. The bloodshot water wallowed and surged. There were loathsome upthrows and overturnings of waves and gore and wound slurry. With his death upon him, he had dived deep into his marsh den, drowned out of his life and his heathen soul. Hell claimed him there.
Then away they rode, the old retainers with many a young man following after a troop on horseback, in high spirits on their bay steeds. Beowulf's doings were praised over and over again. Nowhere, they said, north or south between the two seas or under the tall sky and the broad earth, was there anyone better to raise a shield or to rule a kingdom. Yet there is no laying of blame on their lord, the noble Hrothgar. He was a good king. At times the warband broke into a gallop, letting their chestnut horses wherever they found the going good on those well-known tracks. Meanwhile, a thane of the king's household, a carrier of tales, a traditional singer deeply schooled in the lore of the past, linked a new theme to strict meter. The man started to recite with skill, rehearsing Beowulf's triumphs and feats in well-fashioned lines, entwining his words. He told what he'd heard, repeated in songs about Sigmund's exploits, all of those many feats and marvels, all the struggles and wanderings of Wel's son. Things unknown to anyone except Fitela, Feuds and foul doings confined by uncle to nephew when he felt the urge to speak of them. Always he had been partners in the fight, friends in need. They killed giants. Their conquering swords had brought them down. After his death, Sigmund's glory grew and grew, because of his courage when he killed the dragon, the guardian of the horde. Under Grey Stone he had dared to enter all by himself to face the worst without Fitela. But it came to pass that his sword plunged right through those radiant scales and drove into the wall. The dragon died of it. His daring had given him total possession of the treasure hoard, his to dispose of however he liked. He loaded a boat. Wel's son weighted her hold with dazzling spoils. The hot dragon melted. Sigmund's name was known everywhere. He was utterly valiant and venturesome. A fence around his fighters and flourished therefore after King Hermod's power was declined and his campaigns slowed down. The king was betrayed, ambushed in Jutland, overpowered and done away with. The waves of his grief had beaten him down, made him a burden, a source of anxiety to his own nobles. The expedition was often condemned in those earlier times by experienced men, men who relied on his lordship for redress, who presumed that the part of a prince was to thrive on his father's throne and defend the nation, the shielding land where they lived and belonged, its holdings and strongholds. Such was Beowulf in the affection of his friends and of everyone alive. But evil had entered into Hermod. They kept racing each other, urging their mounts down sandy lanes. The light of day broke and kept brightening. Bands of retainers galloped in excitement to the gabled hall to see the marvel. The king himself, guardian of the ring hoard, goodness in person, walked in majesty from the women's quarters, with a numerous train, attended by his queen and her crowd of maidens across the mead hall.
When Hrothgar arrived at the hall, he spoke, standing on the steps under the steep eaves, gazing towards the roofwork and Grendel's talon. First and foremost, let the Almighty Father be thanked for this sight. I suffered a long harrowing by Grendel, but the heavenly shepherd can work his wonders always and everywhere. Not long since, it seemed I would never be granted the slightest solace or relief from any of my burdens. The best of houses glittered and reeked and ran with blood. This one worry outweighed all others, a constant distress to counselors entrusted with defending the people's forts from assault by monsters and demons. But now a man, with the Lord's assistance, has accomplished something none of us could manage before now for all our efforts. Whoever she was who brought forth this flower of manhood, if she is still alive, that woman can say that in her labor the Lord of ages bestowed a grace on her. So now, Beowulf, I adopt you in my heart as a dear son. Nourish and maintain this new connection, you noblest of men. There'll be nothing you'll want for, no worldly goods that won't be yours. I have often honored smaller achievements, recognized warriors not nearly as worthy, lavished rewards on the less deserving. But you have made yourself immortal by your glorious action. May the God of ages continue to keep and requite you well. Beowulf, son of Ectheo, spoke. We have gone through with a glorious endeavor and been much favored in this fight. We dared against the unknown. Nevertheless, if you could have seen the monster himself where he lay beaten, I would have been better pleased. My plan was to pounce, pin him down in a tight grip and grapple him to death. Have him panting for life, powerless and clasped in my bare hands, his body in thrall. But I couldn't stop him from slipping my hold. The Lord allowed it, my lock on him wasn't strong enough. He struggled fiercely and broke and ran. Yet he bought his freedom at a high price, for he left his hand and arm and shoulder to show he had been here, a cold comfort for having come among us. And now he won't be long for this world. He has done his worst, but his wound will end him. He is haps and hooped and hurpling with pain, limping and looped in it. Like a man outlawed for wickedness, he must await the mighty judgment of God in majesty. There was less tampering and big talk than from Unferth the boaster, less of his blather as the Hall-Thans eyed the awful proof of the hero's prowess, the slayed hand under the eaves. Every nail, claw, scale, and spur, every spike and welt on his hand of that heathen brute was like barbed steel. Everybody said there was no honed iron hard enough to pierce him through, no timed proof blade that could cut his brutal, blood-caked cloth.
Then the order was given for all hands to help to refurbish Hera immediately. Men and women thronging the wine hall, getting it ready. Gold threads shone in the wall hangings, woven scenes that attracted and held the eye's attention. But iron braced as the inside of it had been, that bright room lay in ruins now. The very doors had been dragged from their hinges. Only the roof remained unscathed by the time the guilt-fouled fiend turned tail in despair of his life. But death is not easily escaped from by anyone. All of us with souls, earth dwellers, and children of men, must make our way to a destination already ordained where the body, after the banqueting, sleeps on its deathbed. Then the due time arrived for Halfdane's son to proceed to the hall. The king himself would sit down to feast. No group ever gathered in greater numbers or better around their ring-giver. The benches filled with famous men who fell to with relish. Round upon round of mead was passed. Those powerful kingsmen, Hrothgar and Hrothulf, were in high spirits in the raftered hall. Inside here was nothing but friendship. The shielding nation was not yet familiar with feud and betrayal. The Halfdane's son presented Beowulf with gold standard as a victory gift, an embroidered banner, also breastmail and a helmet, and a sword carried high. That was both precious object and token of honor. So Beowulf drank his drink at ease. It was hardly a shame to be showered with such gifts in front of the hall troops. There haven't been many moments, I am sure, when men exchanged for such treasures at so friendly a sitting. And in Bow's Ridge, a band lapped with wire, arced over the helmet, head protecting the keen ground-cutting ledge from damaging it when danger threatened and the man was battling behind his shield. Next, the king ordered 8 horses with gold bridles to be brought through the yard into the hall. The harness of one included a saddle of sumptuous design, the battle seat where the son of Halfdane rode when he wished to join the swordplay. Wherever the killing and carnage were the worst, he would be the one, fighting hard. Then the Danish prince, descendant of Ing, handed over both the arms and the horses, urging Beowulf to use them well. And so their leader, the lord and guard of coffer and strong room, with customary grace, bestowed upon Beowulf both sets of gifts. A fair witness can see how well each one behaved. The chieftain went on to reward the others. Each man on the bench who had sailed with Beowulf and risked the voyage received a bounty, some treasured possession. In compensation, a price in gold was settled for the great Grendel had cruelly killed earlier, and he would have killed more. He had not been mindful God and one man's daring prevented that doom. Past and present, God's will prevails. Hence, understanding is always a prudent mind. Whoever remains for long here in the earthly life will enjoy and endure more than enough. They sang then and played to please the hero. Words and music for their warrior prince, harp tunes and tales of adventure. There were high times on the hall benches, and the king's poet performed this part, with the saga of Finn and his sons unfolding the tale of the fierce attack in Finn's land where Naef and king of the Danes met death.
Hildebert had little cause to credit the youth as son and brother. She lost them both on the battlefield. She bereft and blameless they, foredoomed, cut down, and spear-gored. She, the woman in shock, waylaid by grief. Hoke's daughter, how could she not lament her fate when morning came and the light broke on her murdered dears? And so, farewell delight on earth, war carried away Finn's troop of thanes, all but a few. How then could Finn hold the line or fight on to the end with Hengist? How save the rump of that force from that enemy chief? So a truce was offered, as followed: first, separate quarters to be cleared for the Danes, hall and throne to be shared with the Frisians. Then second, every day, at the dole out of gifts, Sin, son of Folkwald, should honor the Danes, bestow with an even hand to Hengist and Hengist's men the wrought gold rings, bounty to match the treasure he gave his own Frisians, to keep morale in the beer hall high. Both sides then sealed their agreement with oaths to Hengist. Finn swore openly, solemnly, that the battle survivors would be guaranteed honor and status. No infringement by word or deed, no provocation would be permitted. Their own ring-giver, after all, was dead and gone. They were leaderless in forced alliance to his murderer. So if any Frisian stirred up bad blood with insinuation or taunts about this, the blade of the sword would arbitrate it. A funeral pyre was then prepared, effulgent gold brought out from the hoard. The pride and prince of the shielding lay awaiting the flame. Everywhere there were blood-plastered coats of mail. The pyre was heaped with boar-shaped helmets forged in gold with gashed corpses of well-born Danes. Then Hildebert ordered her own son's body to be burnt with Haneus, the flesh on his bones to sputter and blaze beside his uncle's. The woman wailed and sang keens. The warrior went up. Carcass flames swirled and fumed. They stood round the burial mound and howled as heads melted, crusted gashes spattered and ran bloody matter. The glutton element flamed and consumed the dead of both sides. Their great days were gone. Warriors scattered to homes and forts all over Friesland, fewer now, feeling loss of friends. Hengist stayed, lived out that whole resentful, blood-sullen winter with Finn. Homesick and helpless, no ring-whirled prow could up then and away on the sea. Wind and water raged with storms, wave and shingle were shackled in ice. Until another year appeared in the yard, as it does to this day, the seasons constant, the wonder of light coming over us. Then winter was gone, earth's lap grew lovely, longingly woke in the cooped-up exile for a voyage home, but more for vengeance, some way of bringing things to a head. His sword arm hankered to greet the Eutus, so he did not balk once Hunlefing placed on his lap dazzled the duel, best sword of all, whose edges Eutus knew only too well. Thus blood was spilled, the gallant Finn slain in his home, after Guthlaf and Olslaf back from their voyage made old accusation, the brutal ambush, the fate they suffered, all blamed on Finn. The wildest in them had to brim over. The hall ran red with the blood of enemies. Finn was cut down, the queen brought away, and everything the shieldings could find inside Finn's walls, the Frisian king's gold collars and gemstones, swept off to the ship. Over sea lanes then, back to Daneland, the warrior troop bore that lady home.
The poem was over. The poet had performed. A pleasant murmur started on the benches. Stewards did the rounds with wine in splendid jugs, and Wealthial came to sit in her gold crown between two good men, uncle and nephew, each one of whom still trusted the other, and the forthright Unferth, admired by all for his mind and courage, although under a cloud for killing his brothers, reclined near the king. The queen spoke. Enjoy this drink, my most generous lord. Raise up your goblet, entertain the Geats, duly and gently, discourse with them, be open-handed, happy and fond. Relish their company, but recollect as well all of the boons that have been bestowed on you. The bright court of Herod has been cleansed, and now the word is that you want to adopt this warrior as a son. So, while you may bask in your fortune, and then bequeath kingdom and nation to your kith and kin before your decease, I am certain that Hrothulf, he is noble and will use the young ones well. He will not let you down. Should you die before him, he will treat our children truly and fairly. He will honor, I am sure, our two sons. Repay them in kind when he recollects all the good things we gave him once, the favor and respect he found in his childhood. She turned then to the bench where her boys sat, Hrethric and Hrothmund, with the other nobles' sons, all the youth together, and that good man, Beowulf the Geat, sat between the brothers. The cup was carried to him, kind words spoken in welcome, and a wealth of wroth gold graciously bestowed. 2 arm bangles, a mail shirt and rings, and the most resplendent torque of gold I ever heard tell of anywhere on earth or under heaven. There was no hoard like it since Hama snatched the Brosing's neck chain and bore it away with its gems and settings to his shining fort, away from Eormenric's wiles and hate, and thereby ensured his eternal reward. He, like the Geat, grandson of Swording, wore this neck ring on his last raid. At bay under his banner, he defended the booty, treasure he had won. Fate swept him away because of his proud need to provoke a feud with the Frisians. He fell beneath his shield in the same gem-crusted kingly gear he had worn when he crossed the frothing wave vat. So the dead king fell into Frankish hands. They took his breastmail, also his neck torque, and punier warriors plundered the slain when the carnage ended. Gay corpses covered the field. Applause filled the hall. Then Wealhtheow pronounced in the presence of the company, "Take delight in this torque, dear Beowulf. Wear it for luck, and wear also this mail from our people's armory. May you prosper in them. Be acclaimed for strength, for kindly guidance to these two boys, and your bounty will be sure. You have won renown. You are known to all men, far and near, now and forever. Your sway is wide as the wind's home, as the sea around cliffs. And so, my prince, I wish you a lifetime's luck and blessings to enjoy this treasure. Treat my sons with tender care. Be strong and kind. Here each comrade is true to the other, loyal to Lord, loving in spirit. The thanes have one purpose. The people are ready. Having drunk and pledged, the ranks do as I bid." She moved then to her place. Men were drinking wine at the rare feast. How could they know fate, the grim shape of things to come, the threat looming over many thanes as night approached? The king Hrothgar prepared to retire to his quarter. Retainers in great numbers were posted on guard as so often in the past. Benches were pushed back, bedding gear and bolsters spread across the floor, and one man lay down to his rest, already marked for death. At their heads they placed their polished timber battle shields, and on the bench above them each man's kit was kept to hand. A towering war helmet, webbed mail shirt, and great shafted spear. It was their habit, always and everywhere, to be ready for action, at home or in the camp, in whatever case and at whatever time they need arose, to rally round their lord. They were right people.
They went to sleep, and one paid dearly for its night's ease, as had happened to them often, ever since Grendel occupied the Gold Hall, committing evil until the end came, death after his crimes. Then it became clear, obvious to everyone once the fight was over, that an avenger lurked and was still alive, grimly biding time. Grendel's mother, monstrous Hellbride, brooded on her wrongs. She had been forced down into fearful waters, the gulf depths, after Cain had killed his father's son, felled his own brother with the sword, branded and outlawed, marked by having murdered. He moved into the wilds, shunned company and joy. And from Cain there sprang misbegotten spirits, among them Grendel, the banished and accursed. Due to come to grips with the Watcher and Harrow waiting to do battle, the monster wretched and wrestled with him, but Beowulf was mindful of his strength, the wondrous gifts God had showered on him. He relied for help on the Lord all, on his care and favor. So he overcame the foe, brought down the hellbrute, broke and bowed, outcast from all sweetness, the enemy of mankind made for his death then. But now his mother had sallied forth on savage journey, grief racked and ravenous, desperate for revenge. She came to Harrow. There inside the hall Danes lay asleep, earls who would soon endure a great reversal. Once Grendel's mother attacked and entered, her onslaught was lessened only by as much as an Amazon warrior's strength, and less than an armed man's when he hefted a sword, its hammered edge and gleaming blade slaughtered in blood. Braces the sturdy boar ridge of a helmet. Then in the hall horn swords still were grabbed from the bench. Many a broad shields lifted the brace. There was a little thought of helmets of woven mail when they woke in terror. The Helldam was in panic, desperate to get out. In mortal terror, the moment she was found, she had pounced and taken one of the retainers in a tight hold, then headed for the Hagar. This man was the most beloved of his friend. He trusted between the two seats. She had done away his great warrior, ambushed him at rest. Beowulf elsewhere, earlier after the award of the treasure, the Grey had been given another logging. There was an uproar in Harrow. She had snatched their trophy, Grendel's bloodied hand. It was a fresh blow, the afflicted bond. The bargain was hard, both parties having to pay with their lives of friends. And old lord, the great-haired warrior, was heart-sore and weary when he heard the news. His highest-placed advisor, his dearest companion, was dead and gone. Beowulf was quickly brought to the chamber. The winner of fights, the arch-warrior, came first footing in his fellow troops. They were the king and wisdom waited, still wondering whether Almighty God would ever turn the tide on his misfortunes. So Beowulf entered his band and attendants in wooden floorboards and banged and rings as he advanced, hurrying to the address Prince of Ingwins, asking if he'd rested since the urgent summons had come as a surprise. The Haggard, the shielding's helmet spoke. Rest? What is rest? Sorrow has returned, alas, for the Danes. Parasite is dead.
Then Hrothgar, the shielding's helmet, spoke. Rest, what is rest? Sorrow has returned. Alas for the Danes, Ashera is dead. He was Yermanlov's elder brother and a soulmate to me, a true mentor, my right-hand man when the ranks clashed and our boar crest had to take a battering in the line of action. Asher was everything the world admires in a wise man and a friend. Then this roaming killer came in a fury and slaughtered him in Heorot, where she is hiding, glutting on the corpse and glorying in her escape, I cannot tell. She has taken up the feud because of last night, when you killed Grendel, wrestled and racked him in ruinous combat since for too long he had terrorized us with his depredations. He died in battle, paid with his life, and now this powerful other one arrives, this force for evil, driven to avenge her kinsman's death, or so it seems to Danes in their grief, in the anguish every Dane endures at the loss of a ring-giver. Now that the hand that bestowed so richly has been stilled in death, I have heard it said by my people in Hall, counselors who live in the upland country, that they have seen two such creatures prowling the moors, huge marauders from some other world. One of these things, as far as anyone ever can discern, looks like a woman. The other, warped in the shape of a man, moves beyond the pale, bigger than any man, an unnatural birth called Grendel by the country people in former days. They are fatherless creatures, and their whole ancestry is hidden in a past of demons and ghosts. They dwell apart amongst wolves on the hills, on wind-swept crafts and treacherous quiches, where cold streams pour down the mountain and disappear under mist and moorland. A few miles from here, a frost-stiffened wood waits and keeps watch above Vermeer, the overhanging bank. It's a maze of tree roots mirrored in the surface. At night there something uncanny happens. The water burns, and the mere bottom has never been sounded by the sons of men. On its bank, the heather stepper halts. The hart and flight from pursuing hounds will turn to face them with firm set horns and die in the wood, rather than dive beneath its surface. That is no good place. When wind blows up and stormy weather makes clouds scud and the skies weep, out of its depths a dirty surge is pitched towards the heavens. Now help depends again on you and on you alone. The gap of danger where the demon waits is still unknown to you. Seek it if you dare. I will compensate you for settling the feud as I did the last time with lavish wealth, coffers of coiled gold if you come back. Beowulf's son of Ecgtheow spoke. Wise sir, do not grieve. It is always better to avenge dear ones than to indulge in mourning, for every one of us living in this world means waiting for our end. Let whoever can win glory before death. When a warrior is gone, that will be his best and only bulwark. So arise, my lord, and let us immediately set forward on the trail of this troll dam. I guarantee you, she will not get away, not to dense underground nor upland groves, nor the ocean floor. She'll have nowhere to flee to. Endure your troubles today. Burr up and be the man I expect you to be.
With that, the old lord sprang to his feet and praised God for Beowulf's pledge. Then a bit and halter were brought for his horse with the plaited mane. The wise king mounted the royal saddle and rode out in style, with the force of shield bearers. The forest paths were marked all over with the monster's tracks. Her trail on the ground, wherever she had gone, across the dark moors, dragging away the body of that thane, Hrothgar's best counselor and overseer of the country. So the noble prince proceeded undismayed up fells and screes, along narrow footpaths and ways where they were forced into a single file, ledges on cliffs above lair of water monsters. He went in front with a few men, good judges of the lie of the land, and suddenly discovered the dismal wood. Mountain trees growing out at an angle above gray stones, the bloodshot water surged underneath. It was a sword below to all the Danes, friends of the Shieldings, a hurt to each and every one. of the noble company when they came upon Ashir's head at the foot of the cliff. Everybody gazed at the hot gore kept welling up, and an urgent war horn repeated its note. The whole party sat down to watch. The water was infested with all kinds of reptiles. There were withering sea dragons and monsters slouching on slopes by the cliffs, serpents and wild things such as those that often surface at dawn to roam the sail road and doom the voyage. Down they plunged, laughing in anger at the loud call of the battle bow. An arrow from the bow of the gate chief got one of them as he surged to the surface. The seasoned shaft stuck deep in his flank, and his freedom in the water got less and less. It was his last swim. He was swiftly overwhelmed in the shallows, propped by bare board sears. Cornered, beaten, pulled up on the blank, a strange lake berth. A loathsome catch, men gazed at in awe. Beowulf got ready, donned his war gear indifferent to death. His mighty, hand-forged, fine-webbed mail would soon meet with the menace underwater. It would keep the bone cage of his body safe. No enemy's clasp could crush him in it. No vicious armlock choke his life out. To guard his head, he had a glittering helmet that was due to be muddied on the mere bottom and blurred in the upsworld. It was a beaten of gold, princely headgear hooped in halves by a weaponsmith who had worked wonders in days gone by and adorned it with bowed spears. Since then, it had resisted every sword. And another item, led by Ernfrith at the moment of need, was no small importance. The Brehern handed him a Holton weapon, a rare and ancient sword named Hunting. The iron blade, with its ill-boding patterns, had been tempered in blood. It had never failed the hand of anyone who had hefted in the battle, anyone who had fought and faced the worst in the gap of danger. That was not the first time it had been called to perform heroic feats. With that, he led the battle to the battle swordsman Ernr, the strong-built son of Iglaf. Could hardly have remembered the ranting speech he made in his cups. He was not man enough to face the turmoil of fight underwater and the risk to his life, so that he had lost fame and repute. It was different for the other, rigged out in his gear, ready to battle. Beowulf, son of Ichthus, spoke. Wisest of kings, now that I have come to the point of action, I ask you to recall what we said earlier, that you, son of Halfdane and Gold's friend to retainers, that you, if I shall fail and suffer death while serving your cause, would act like a father to me. If this combat kills me, take care of my young company, my commanders in arms, and be sure, my beloved Hrothgar, to send Hygelac the treasure I receive. Let the Lord of the Great gaze on the gold, let Hanthar's son take note of it, and see that I found a ring giver of rare magnificence, and enjoy the good of his generosity. And Ernfrith is to have what I inherited. To that far-famed man I bequeath my own. Sharp-honed, wave-sheened, wander blade, with hurting I shall gain glory or die. With hurting I shall gain glory or die.
After these words, the prince of the withered Geats was impatient to be away and plunged suddenly, without more ado. He dived into the heaving depths of the lake. It was the best part of the day before he could see the solid bottom. Quickly the one who haunted those waters, who had scavenged and gone her gluttonous rounds for 100 seasons, sensed the human observing her outlandish lair from above. So she lunged and clutched and managed to catch him in her brutal grip, but his body for all that remained unscathed. The mesh of the chainmail saved him on the outside. Her savage talons failed to rip the web of his war shirt. Then when she touched bottom, that wolfish swimmer carried the ring-mailed prince to her court, so that for all his courage he could never use the weapons he carried. And a bewildering horde came at him from the depths, droves of sea beasts who attacked with tusks and tore at his chainmail in a ghastly onslaught. The gallant man could see he had entered some hellish turmoil, and yet the water there did not work against him, because the hall roofing held off the force of the current. Then he saw firelight, a gleam and flare-up, a glimmer of brightness. The hero observed that swamp thing from hell, the torn hag in all her terrible strength.
then waved his war sword and swung his arm. The decorated blade came down ringing and singing on her head, but he soon found his battle torch extinguished. The shining blade refused to bite. It spared her and failed the man in his need. It had gone through many hand-to-hand fights, had hewed the armor and elements of the doomed, but here at last the fabulous powers of that heirloom failed. Hygelac's kinsman kept thinking about his name and fame. He never lost heart. Then in a fury he flung his sword away. The keen inlaid worm loop patterned steel was hurled to the ground. He would have to rely on the might of his arm. So must a man do who intends to gain enduring glory in combat. Life doesn't cost him a thought. Then the Prince of Wargeats, warming to this fight with Grendel's mother, gripped her shoulder and laid about a battle frenzy. He pitched his killer opponent to the floor, but she rose quickly and retaliated, grappled him tightly in her grim embrace. The sure-footed fighter felt daunted. The strongest of warriors stumbled and fell. So she pounced upon him and pulled out a broad, weeded knife. Now she would avenge her only child. But the mesh of chainmail on Beowulf's shoulder shielded his life, turned the edge and tip of the blade. The son of Ectheo would have surely perished, and the Geats lost their warrior under the wide earth, had the strong links and locks of his war gear not helped to save him. Holy God decided the victory. It was easy for the Lord, the ruler of heaven, to redress the balance once Beowulf got back upon his feet. Then he saw a blade that boded well, a sword in her armory, an ancient heirloom from the days of the giants, an ideal weapon, one that any warrior would envy, but so huge and heavy of itself only Beowulf would wield it in a battle. So the shieldling's hero, hard-pressed and enraged, took a firm hold of the hilt and swung the blade in an arc, a resolute blow that hit deep in her neckbone and severed it entirely. Toppling the doomed house of her flesh, she fell to the floor. The sword dripped blood. The swordsman was elated.
A light appeared, and the place brightened the way the sky does when heaven's candle is shining clearly. He inspected the vault, with sword held high, its hilt raised to guard and threaten Hygelac's thane, scattered by the wall in Grendel's wake. Now the weapon was to prove its worth. The warrior determined to take revenge for every gross act Grendel has committed, and not only for that one occasion when he'd come to slaughter the sleeping troops. 15 of Hrothgar's house guards, surprised on their benches, ruthlessly devoured, and as many again carried away, a brutal plunder. Beowulf, in his fury, now settled that score. He saw the monster in his resting place, war-weary, wrecked, a lifeless corpse, a casualty of the Battle of Heorot. The body gaped at the stroke dealt to it after death. Beowulf cut the corpse's head off. Immediately the counselors, keeping a lookout with Hrothgar, watching the lake water, saw a heave up and surge of waves and blood in the backwash. They bowed gray heads, spoke in a sage experienced way about the good warrior, how they never again expected to see the prince returning in triumph to their king. It was clear to many that the wolf of the deep had destroyed him forever. The 9th hour of the day arrived. The brave shieldings abandoned the cliff top, and the king went home, but sick at heart, staring at the mere. The strangers held on. They wished without hope to behold their lord Beowulf himself. Meanwhile, the sword began to wilt into gory icicles, to slather and thaw. It was a wonderful thing, the way they melted as ice melts when the father eases the fetters off the frost and unravels the water ropes. He who wields power over time and tide is the true lord. The gate captain saw treasure in abundance, but carried no spoils from those quarters, except for the head and the inland hilt embossed with jewels. Its blade had melted, and the scrollwork on it burned. So scalding was the blood of the poisonous fiend who had perished there. Then away he swam, the one who survived the fall of his enemies, flailing to the surface. The wide water, the waves and pools were no longer infested. Once the wandering fiend let go of her life in this unreliable world, the seafarer's leader made for land, resolutely swimming, delighted with his prize, the mighty load he was lugging to the surface. Thanes advanced in the troop to meet him, thanking God and taking great delight
in seeing the prince back safe and sound. Quickly, the hero's helmet and mail shirt were loosed and unlaced. The lake settled, clouds darkened above the bloodshot depths. With high hearts, they headed away along footpaths and trails through the fields. Roasted, they knew, each of them wrestling with the head they were carrying from the lakeside cliff. Men kingly in their courage and capable of difficult work. It was a task for four to hoist Grendel's head on a spear and bear it under strain to their bright hall. But soon enough, as they neared the place, 14 gates in fine fettle, striding across the outlying ground in a delighted throng around their leader. In he came, the Thane's commander, the arch-warrior to address Hrothgar. His courage was proven, his glory was secure. Grendel's head was hauled by the hair, dragged across the floor where the people were drinking, a order for both queen and command to behold. They stared in awe. It was an astonishing sight.
Beowulf, son of Beowulf spoke, so son of Havlane, prince of the shieldings, we are glad to bring this booty from the lake. It is a token of triumph, and we tender it to you. I barely survived the battle underwater. It was hard fought, and a desperate affair that could have gone badly. If God had not helped me, the outcome would have been quick and fatal. Although hunting is hard-edged, I can never bring it to bear in battle, but the Lord of Men allowed me to behold. For he often helps the unbefriended, an ancient sword shining on the wall, a weapon made for giants, therefore the wielding. And then my moment came in the combat, and I struck the dwellers in that den. Next thing, the Damascene sword blade melted, imploded, and it burned. In the rushing blood I have rested on the hilt. From the enemy's hand I have avenged the evil done to the Danes. It is what was due, and this I pledge, O Prince of the Shieldings, you can sleep secure. With your company of troops in Herod Hall, never need you fear for a single Dane in your scepter nation. Your warriors are old, that laying waste of life that you or your people endured of yore. Then the gold hilt was handed over, and the old lord, a relic from long ago, was for the venerable ruler. The rare smith work was passed on to the prince of the Danes. When those devils perished, once that removed, that murdering guilt steeped the god-cursed fiend, eliminating the unholy life. And his mother as well. It was willed to that king, who all lavished the gift lords of the north, was the best regarded between the two seas. Hrothgar spoke. He examined the hilt, the relic of old times. It was engraved all over and shown how war first came into the world, and the flood destroyed the tribe of giants. They suffered a terrible severance to the Lord. The Almighty made the waters rise, drowned them in deluge for the retribution in pure gold, and laid the sword guards. There were rune markings correcting in size, stating that in recording for whom the sword had first been made and ornamented. In its scrollwork hilt, then everyone hushed as the son of Halfling spoke this wisdom. A protector of his people, pledged to uphold truth and justice and respect tradition, is entitled to affirm that this man was born to distinction. Beowulf, my friend, your fame has gone far and wide. You are known everywhere. In all things you are even-tempered, prudent, and resolute. So I stand firm by the promise of friendship we exchanged before. Forever you will be your people's mainstay and your own warrior's helping hand. Here Mott was different. The way he behaved in Aquila's son, his rise in the world brought little joy to the Danish people, only death and destruction. He vented his rage on men, caroused with, killed his own comrades. A pariah king who cut himself off from his own kind, even though Almighty God made him eminent, powerful, and marked him from the start for a happy life. But a change happened. He grew bloodthirsty, gave no more rings. To honor the Danes, he suffered in the end for having plagued his people for so long. His life lost happiness.
So learn from this and understand true values. I who tell you have withered into wisdom. It is a great wonder how Almighty God in His magnificence favors our race with rank and scope and the gift of wisdom. His sway is wide. Sometimes He allows the mind of a man of distinguished birth to follow its bent, grants him fulfillment and felicity on earth, and affords to command his own country. He permits him to lord him in many lands until the man in his unthinkingness forgets that it will ever end for him. He indulges his desires. Illness and old age mean nothing to him. His mind is untroubled by envy or malice, or the thought of enemies with their hate-haunt swords. The whole world conforms to his will. He is kept from the worst until an element of overweening enters him and takes hold, while the soul's guard, its sentry, drowses, grown too distracted, A killer stalks him, an archer who draws a deadly bow. And then the man is hit in the heart. The arrow flies beneath his defenses. The devious promptings of the demon start. His old possessions seem paltry to him now. He covets and resents, dishonors custom and bestows no gold. And because of good things that the heavenly powers gave him in the past, he ignores the shape of things to come. Then finally the end arrives, when the body he was lent collapses and falls prey to its death. Ancestral possessions and the goods he hoarded are inherited by another who lets them go with a liberal hand. O flower of warriors, beware of the trap. Choose, dear Beowulf, the better part, eternal rewards. Do not give way to pride, for a brief while your strength is in bloom, but it fades quickly. And soon there will follow illness or the sword to lay you low, or a sudden fire, or a surge of water, or jabbing blade, or javelin from the air, or repellent age. Your piercing eye will dim and darken, and the death will arrive, dear warrior, to sweep you away. Just so I ruled the Ring Danes' country for 50 years, defended them in wartime with spear and sword against constant assaults by many tribes. I came to believe my enemies had faded from the face of the earth. Still, what happened was a hard reversal from bliss to grief. Grendel struck after laying in wait. He laid waste to the land, and from that moment my mind was in dread of his depredations. So I praised God in his heavenly glory that I lived to behold this head dripping blood, and that after such harrowing I can look upon it in triumph at last. Take your place, then, with pride and pleasure, and move to the feast. Tomorrow morning our treasure will be shared and showered upon you. The great was elated and gladly obeyed the old man's bidding. He sat on the bench, and soon all was restored, the same as before. Happiness came back. The hall was thronged, and a banquet set forth. Black night fell and covered them in darkness. For the old campaigner, the great-haired prince was ready for bed, and a need for rest came over the brave shield-bearing gate. He was a weary seafarer, far from home, so immediately a house guard guided him out, one whose office entailed looking after whatever a thane on the road in those days might need or require. It was a noble courtesy. That great heart rested.
That great heart rested. The hall towered, gold-shingled and gabled, and the guests slept in it, until the black raven, with raucous glee, announced heaven's joy, and a hurry of brightness overran the shadows. Warriors rose quickly, impatient to be off. Their own country was beaconing the nobles, and the bold voyagers longed to be aboard his distant boat. Then stalwart fighter ordered Runting to be brought to Unferth and bathe Unferth. Take the sword and thank him for lending it. He said he had found it a friend in a battle, and a powerful help. He put no blame on the blade's cutting edge. He was a considerate man. And there the warriors stood on their war gear, eager to go, while their honored lord approached the platform where the other sat. The undoubted hero addressed Hrothgar. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. Now we who cross the wide sea have to inform you that we feel the desire to return to Hygelac. Here we have been welcome and thoroughly entertained. You have treated us well. If there's any favor on earth I can perform beyond deeds of arms I have done already, anything that will merit your affections more, I shall act, my lord, with alacrity. If I ever hear from across the ocean that people on your borders are threatening battle, as attackers have done from time to time, I shall land with thousands of thanes at my back, to help your cause. Hygelac may be young to rule a nation, but this much I know about the king of the Geats. He will come to my aid and want to support me by word and actions. In your hour of need, when honor dictates, that I raise a hedge of spears around you. Then if Renthik should think about traveling as a king's son to the court of the Geats, he will find many friends, foreign places yield more to one who is himself worth meeting? Hrothgar spoke and answered him. The Lord in his wisdom sent you those words, and they came from the heart. I have never heard so young a man make truer observations. You are strong in body and mature in mind, impressive in speech. If it should come to pass that Renthel's descendant dies beneath spear, if deadly battle of the sword, blades, or disease fails the prince who guards your people, and you are still alive, then I firmly believe that the seafaring Geats won't find a man worthier of acclaim as their king and defender than you. If only you would undertake the lordship of your homeland. My liking for you deepens within time, dear Beowulf. What you have done is to draw two peoples, the Geat nation and us neighboring Danes, into shared peace and pact of friendship, in spite the hatreds we have harbored in the past. For as long as I rule this far-flung land, treasures will change hands and each side will treat the other with gifts. Across the gannet's path, over the broad sea, world prows will bring presents and tokens. I know your people are beyond reproach in every respect, steadfast in the old way with friends and foe. Then the earl's defender furnished the hero with 12 treasures and told him to send it out, sail with those gifts safely home, to the people he loved, but to return promptly. And so the good and great-haired Dane, that high-born king, kissed Beowulf and embraced his neck, then broke down into sudden tears. Two forebodings disturbed him in his wisdom, but one was stronger. Never more would they meet each other face to face. And such was his affection that he could not help being overcome. His fondness for the men was so deep-founded it warmed his heart and wound the heartstrings tight in his breast.
The embrace ended, and Beowulf, glorious in his gold regalia, stepped to the green earth. Straining at anchor and ready for boarding, his boat awaited him. So they went on their journey, and Hrothgar's generosity was praised repeatedly. He was a peerless king until old age sapped his strength and did him mortal harm, as it has done so many. Down to the waves then, dressed in the web of their chainmail and war shirts, the young man marched in high spirits. The coast guard espied them, Thane setting forth the same as before. His salute this time from the top of the cliff was far from unmannerly. He galloped to meet them, and as they took ship in their shining gear, he said how welcome they would be in Geatland. Then the broad hull was beached on the sand to be cargoed with treasure, horses, and war gear. The curved prow motioned, the mast stood high above Hrothgar's riches in the loaded hold. The guard who had watched the boat was given a sword with gold fittings, and in future days that present would make him a respected man at his place on the mead bench. Then the keel plunged and shook in the sea, and they sailed from Denmark. Right away the mast was rigged with its sea shawl, sail ropes were tightened, timbers thrummed, and stiff winds kept the wave crosser skimming ahead as she heaved forward. Her foamy neck was fleet and buoyant, a lapped prow loping over currents, until finally the Geats caught sight of coastline and familiar cliffs. The keel reared up, wind lifted it home. It hit on the land.